Welcome to Broken Trust Stories. If you love crazy, unbelievable stories, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out. Let's jump right into today's story. Husband exposes wife's affair, her explosive revenge ends in tragedy. I met Sandi when she was hired and put in the cubicle next to mine. Charlie walked her into my cube and said, "Rob, this is Sandi Gilpin. It is her first day, so you show her around, okay?" Like I would have said no to the boss, right? If Sandi had been 4 feet tall, weighed 300 pounds, and had warts all over her face, I would have said, "Sure, Charlie." Me. But Sandi wasn't any of those. She was about 5'6" and maybe 120 well-proportioned pounds. She had blonde hair and the bluest eyes I had ever seen. I still said, "Sure, Charlie." And my mind immediately began making lists of things I could show her that would keep her in my company for the next week. I'll make that months. No, better yet, years and years. A quick glance at her left hand and I saw that she wasn't wearing a ring, and when I looked up at her face I saw a small smile that told me that she had noticed me checking her out. "Okay then," Charlie said, "welcome aboard, Sandi, and I'll leave you in Rob's capable hands," and he walked off and left us. As soon as he was gone, Sandi asked, "Are they?" "What?" "Your hands, are they capable?" In that instant I knew that I was going to do my absolute best to make her mine, and I looked right into her eyes and said, "Very." She gave me a "we will see" smile, and I got up from my desk and began showing her around. I asked her to join me for lunch, and she accepted, and over cheese and onion enchiladas at Los Mesos we got acquainted. She had finished college and then had sent out a bunch of resumes, and our company had called her in for an interview, offered her a job, and she had accepted. Her fiancé, who wasn't working at the time, told her that no way was he going to move to Colorado, so she slipped off her engagement ring, dropped it in her lap, and 3 days later she was in Denver. You could drop him that easy. What can I say? We all make mistakes, and he was one of mine. "And you've been in Denver how long?" 5 days. I guess that gives a whole new meaning to my telling Charlie that I would be glad to show you around. How about dinner tonight, so we can sit down and map out a plan to show you what this part of the world is going for it? Sandi and I dated off and on for the next 6 months. I say off and on because she dated other guys also. I wanted to make it exclusive, but she said no. I just got out of a relationship and I don't think I'm ready to tie myself down again. At least not just yet. We made love on our 6th date, and in retrospect I wish that we hadn't. Not because it wasn't good, because it was. Sandi was fantastic in bed. That was the problem. If she was doing me, she was probably doing her other dates as well, and that thought bothered the hell out of me. I didn't know that we didn't talk about things like that, but it followed that if she was doing me, she was probably doing them. It bothered me. It bothered me so much that I started pulling back from her. Where it had been hardly a day went by that I didn't ask her when I could see her again, suddenly I wasn't asking. I went 3 days without saying anything to her, and then on Thursday morning she stuck her head in my cube and asked, "Are we still on for Joan's party Friday?" I looked up from what I was doing and said, "Oh yeah, Joan's party. Sure, we're still on." She gave me a strange look and then went back to her cubicle. Joan's party was fun, and for the most part one had a good time. The parts where the time wasn't so good were the parts where Sandi would be talking to other guys. I found myself wondering if any of them were ones that she had dated, and if she had taken any of them to her bed. By the time the party was over, I had convinced myself that I couldn't live like that. I wanted Sandi, but I couldn't handle the thoughts I was having when I saw her talking to other guys. When I took her back to her apartment after the party, I could tell she was surprised because we usually ended up at my place when we went out. When I walked her to her door at her place, she said, "You're coming in, aren't you?" "Not tonight," I said, and I kissed her on the cheek. "See you at work," and I walked back to my car. As I pulled away, I saw her still standing at her door watching me go. For the next week, I saw Sandi at work every day, and we shared a coffee break or two and a couple of lunches, but I didn't ask her when we could get together again. That Friday, as I was leaving work, she called out to me, and I waved at her and said, "Have a nice weekend," and then I stepped into the elevator and the door closed. I went to a party that night and ran into a girl I used to date. She was there with another guy, but she slipped me a piece of paper and said, "Call me anytime after 8 in the morning, but call me," and then her date claimed her and pulled her out onto the dance floor. She had been a fun date and I had enjoyed her company, but we had gotten into an argument over something so damned important that I couldn't even remember what it was, never patched up the quarrel, and had drifted apart. I called her the next morning around 9 and we talked and made a date for that evening. We went to Bogart's for dinner and we talked about what had happened between us and why. We laughed at how stupid it all seemed when we looked back on it, and then we went to the grotto for drinks and dancing. As we danced, I realized that even though she wasn't Sandi, she was a very nice armful and quite possibly just the lady I needed at that time to get my life back on track. When I took her home, she invited me in, and it was like we were never apart. I remembered where she liked to be touched and what she liked to do, and we did it, and it was good. It was good several times, and then we fell asleep together. The rude awakening came the next morning when I asked her when I could see her again. "You can't love her. I'm getting married next Saturday and you are my last fling. I can give you the rest of today and all night tonight if you want, but that will be the end of it." I took what she offered, and when I stumbled home Monday morning to shower and dress for work, I was exhausted. At 10, I was sipping coffee in the break room, trying to get enough caffeine in me to keep me awake the rest of the day when Sandi slid onto the chair across from me. As she added sugar to her coffee, she said, "Have I developed a bad case of body odor or bad breath?" "Not that I've noticed." "Why do you ask?" "I don't seem to interest you anymore, and I wondered why." "Simple. Your lack of interest in me has finally convinced me that I need to put you out of my mind and get on with my life." "What makes you say that I lack interest in you?" "Let us just say that it isn't the kind of interest that I want." "Can you explain that?" "I'm not interested in being one of many. I'm not interested in asking you out only to be told, 'Sorry, but I have a date that night. Maybe next time,' and to be perfectly honest about it, I'm not interested in possibly sharing what your other dates may have shared with you." "That's cold, Rob. That hurts." "You wanted to know Sandi. You asked, and I answered." I finished my coffee and got up and went back to work. I was surprised to find Sandi sitting on the tailgate of my truck when I got off work. "Can we talk?" she asked as I walked up. "Over coffee or over a drink?" "Neither. Right here is fine." "You hurt me, Rob." That remark about sharing what my other dates may have shared with me was totally uncalled for. If you have anything of that nature, I can guarantee that you did not get it from me. You are that sure of the protection you used. There was no need for protection, Rob. What are you saying, Sandi? That with all the dating you do, I'm the only guy you have make out with? That is just what I'm saying, Rob. I am not a promiscuous slut. If you have anything, you got it from someone else. Maybe that woman you were out with Saturday night. Wendy? No, I don't think so. How do you know about Wendy? I was there at the grotto and I saw you. What is this all about, Sandi? Just what is going on here? I need to clear the air between us, Rob. This morning you said that I lacked interest in you, and you are wrong. The reason I asked if you had lost interest in me is that I was worried that you had. You haven't tried to be with me for weeks now, and then Saturday night I saw you with that woman and I saw how close you danced with her. It was a wake-up call for me. This morning I had intended to ask you to come over and have dinner with me, but things didn't go right. What do you mean a wake-up call? When I saw you with that woman Saturday night, it dawned on me that I could lose you to someone else. Lose me? You didn't want me, so how could you lose me to someone else? If you wanted me, you wouldn't be dating others. You wouldn't be turning me down when I asked you out, and if you wanted me, you damn sure wouldn't be turning me down and telling me it was because you were seeing others. Of course I would. What would it look like if I told you I couldn't go out with you and then you saw me with someone else? I had to be honest about it, Rob. Sandi, you are not making sense to me here. If you wanted me, I would be the only one you would be spending your time with. Try to understand me here, Rob. When I met Walter, I fell head over heels in love with him. He was good-looking, intelligent, witty, had a promising career, and we had a ton of things in common. He was a perfect fit for me. We dated for 9 months, and when he proposed to me, I felt like I had won the lottery. My life was perfect, and then Walter lost his job. He was having trouble finding a new one, and soon he was behind on his rent, and he had to move out of his apartment. I had a small inheritance from my grandmother, and that allowed me to have my own apartment while I worked on my degree. Naturally, I told Walter that he could move in with me. He did, and at first it was like we were newlyweds. Walter couldn't seem to find a job, and soon I was supporting both of us. After a month or so, I began to notice things. Walter always seemed to be at the apartment, no matter what time I got home. He said he spent the day job hunting, but half the time he was unshaven, and who goes job hunting needing a shave? I always seemed to be picking up after him, and he never did anything to help around the apartment. I started missing money from my purse, and at first I thought I had miscounted or had been given the wrong change at the store and hadn't caught it. Then one night I stopped at the bank because I had no cash, and I took $200 out of my account. I went straight home from the bank. I knew exactly what I had in my purse: 9 $20 bills, 1 10 and 2 5s. When I had lunch at the school cafeteria the next day and took my money out to pay the cashier, the 10 was gone and there was only 1 5. I counted the money I had and found that I was missing $35, and there was only one person besides myself who had access to my purse. I confronted Walter on it that night, and he just shrugged and said he was sure I wouldn't mind. After all, it was only $35. To shorten the story, I was relieved when Walter said there was no way he was going to come to Colorado with me. Remember, Rob, Walter was my dream man, my perfect fit, the man meant for me and my Prince Charming. My prince turned out to be a toad. I promised myself I'd be very careful the next time. By our 6th date, I was pretty sure that you were the one, Rob, pretty sure, but don't forget that I was certain with Walter. I was sure enough that I made love with you. But I was still skittish, and I decided that it wouldn't hurt for me to date a few others to make sure that I got it right the second time. What I did, Rob, was take you for granted. You wanted me and we were making love, so I thought I had you and that you would be there when I was finally certain. But then suddenly you weren't talking to me and asking me out, and then I saw you with that other woman, and it looked like I was losing you. So what is it you are trying to say, Sandi? What I'm saying, Rob, is that I don't want to lose you. 3 months later, we were married. We both agreed that we didn't want children, so to eliminate the necessity of messing with condoms, birth control pills, and diaphragms, I had a vasectomy. With no children to get in the way, Sandi and I were able to put our full energies into each other and our careers. The marriage hummed along for 8 years with only the minor glitches that every marriage suffers through. It was 2 weeks after our 8th anniversary when my brother Tom came to me and asked me to go in with him in a startup company. Sandi and I talked it over and decided that it had great potential and that being in on the ground floor could be very lucrative. Her salary and our savings would carry us until the company was up and running, so I took the plunge. After a year, the company caught on and finally took off, but it took a lot of hard work, many late nights and some weekends to make it work. Those late nights and long weekends took a toll on my home life. Sandi was constantly irritable over my lack of attention to her, and our love life suffered. We went from 3 or 4 nights a week down to 2, and sometimes only 1. No lack of desire on my part, I was just too damn tired and worn out when I got home. I kept promising Sandi that if she would just be patient with me, it would get better. I'm doing this for our future, Sandi. I know, Rob, but I'm young and I have needs you are supposed to be taken care of. The hard work finally paid off. The business took off and the late nights ended except for an occasional emergency. Things mellowed around the house and Sandi and I were back to making love 3 and 4 times a week again. 3 weeks before our 10th anniversary, I was sitting at my desk at work when I received an email from infospreader@xxxx.net. I opened it, and what I read turned my world upside down. Did you know that while you were working hard, your wife was giving hers away? Noon to 2 on Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Super 8 Motel on 14th Street. Check it out. I sat there staring at the screen, not wanting to believe it, hoping that it was someone's idea of a joke, but at the same time knowing that it would be so easy to check out and info spreader would know that. Still, it could be a sick joke being played by someone who didn't like me or Sandi. Maybe the arsehole was hoping I'd go home, confront Sandi and end up poisoning our relationship. If that is what his plan was, it wasn't going to happen. Before I said a word, I would have to see it for myself. I didn't have to work late that night, but I stayed late hoping that Sandi would be in bed asleep when I got home. I knew that if she saw me, she would know that something was bothering me, and Sandi was the type who would badger me until she found out what it was. I wouldn't tell, but she might read enough into my behavior that if she was doing what the email said, she might stop until she felt that the heat was off. She was asleep when I got home, and I made sure that I was up and out of the house before she got up in the morning. I was parked in a borrowed car at the Super 8 at 11:30. At 10 to 12, Sandi pulled into the parking lot and sat in her car waiting for something or someone. At 5 to 12, Jason Catron, a guy who worked with Sandi, pulled in beside her. They rolled down windows and talked, and then Jason got out of his car and went into the office, and 5 minutes later Jason and Sandi were in room 214. I didn't stick around to see if they stayed there until 2. The fact that they were there at all told me everything that I needed to know. I suppose I could have done what I did next while I was at the motel, but I wanted maximum humiliation. I was sitting in my car, which was parked next to Jason's in the lot where he and Sandi worked. I saw him come out the door of the building, and I let him almost get to his car before I got out of my car and stood between him and his car. He must have known what was coming because his eyes got big and he tried to turn and get away from me. I grabbed his shoulder and turned him around, and then I smashed him in the mouth as hard as I could. His knees buckled, and I grabbed him and pushed him against his car, and then I beat the shit out of him. I broke his nose, dislocated his jaw, and then I kneed him in the balls and let him drop to the ground. I started kicking him, and I'm almost sure that I heard a rib snap before a couple of guys pulled me off of him. I knew both of them from the company parties I had attended with Sandi. "What the hell, Rob?" one of them said. "Have you gone crazy?" "Not at all, Tom. That's what I do to guys who sleep with my wife." They let me go, and as I turned to walk back to my car, I saw Sandi standing in the doorway, face pale and with a hand over her mouth. I gave her a look that would curdle milk, and then I got in my car and drove home. 45 minutes later, the doorbell rang, and when I answered it, there were 2 cops standing there. I was arrested, taken to jail, and charged with assault and battery. I couldn't make bail until the next morning, and when I got home, I saw that Sandi had apparently moved out. I spread the word that Jason's beating made us even as far as his Sandi was concerned, but that if I spent so much as 1 day of jail time over at his next beating, would leave him in a wheelchair. 3 days later, my lawyer told me that Jason refused to press charges and that the charges were going to be dropped. Then some arsehole assistant district attorney, trying to make a name for himself, said he was going to invoke a little-known and almost never-used law that allowed authorities to bring charges if they thought someone was a public menace. I spread the word that it didn't matter who did what 1 day of jail time, and Jason would be the one paying. 2 days later, Jason told the ADA that he had thrown the first punch, and all I had done was defend myself. The matter was dropped. Jason had been taken care of, but there was still Sandi. I made an appointment with a divorce attorney and set things in motion. 2 weeks from the day I settled up with Jason, Sandi called me and asked me if it was safe for her to come talk to me. I told her that she had nothing to say that I needed to hear or wanted to hear. I told her all I wanted from her was for her to sign the divorce papers when they were ready. "You may not want or need to hear, Rob, but I need to get it off my chest. Please, Rob, it won't take any more than 15 or 20 minutes. I really didn't want to do it, but I told her she could come over Wednesday after I got home from work, but that I would have my brother Tom and Reverend Thomas there as witnesses. Is that really necessary, Rob? It is as far as I'm concerned. You have already stabbed me in the back once, and I'm not going to give you a second shot. No telling what you might tell people or accuse me of if I don't make sure that someone has got my back. Please, Rob, just you and me. No dice, Sandi. If you want to talk to me, those are my conditions. We do it my way, or we don't do it at all." On Wednesday evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my brother and Reverend Thomas when Sandi arrived. I pointed at a seat and told her to get on with it. She looked from me to Tom, to Dan Thomas, and then back to me. You mentioned divorce papers. Is there any way we can avoid that? I love you, Rob, and you know I do. I screwed up. I screwed up big time, and I know it. But I love you, Rob, and I don't want to lose you. I didn't answer her question. I just stared at her for several seconds, and then I asked, "Why, Sandi? Why did you do it?" "I didn't mean to do it. It just happened. You were working late all the time, and since I knew you wouldn't be home anyway, I started stopping after work for drinks with the people I worked with. After a couple of weeks, I had loosened up enough to where I was moaning about how your late hours were ruining my love life. Jason started telling me that it wasn't normal for a guy your age to cut back on love live, even if you were working late and coming home tired. He kept hinting that you were probably getting your makeout from someone else, that you had a girlfriend on the side. Some of the other girls there were telling me the same thing. When I had enough liquor in me, it wasn't hard for them to convince me that there could be some truth to what they were saying, so I called you at work a couple of times and got no answer. When I put that together with your always telling me no when I tried to get you to make love to me, I started believing what they were telling me. One night I had a few too many and I wasn't thinking clearly, and the next thing I knew, Jason had me on the back seat of his car. I knew it was wrong, and I made a half-hearted attempt to stop him, but I had been without sleep over for so long that I didn't fight all that hard, and finally I gave in. She looked at me like she was expecting me to say something, but I just sat there looking at her. I don't know what she saw on my face, but she looked away and then went on with it. After that first time, it got easier and easier. I kept telling myself that you were cheating so I could too. One night, some friends of ours saw me getting out of Jason's car straightening my clothes, and Angie asked me what in the hell was I doing. I told her that you were running around on me and that I was just getting even. She laughed at me and told me to get real, that you would no more cheat on me than you would rob a bank. I decided that I had to prove it to myself, so I drove over and parked down the street from your office and watched you. I did it for 2 weeks, and every night you worked late, and when you did turn the lights out, you went straight home. That's when I realized that I had messed up big time. Excuse me, Reverend. That's all right, my child. I've heard the word before. I tried to end it with Jason, but I couldn't. I don't know how to explain it. Jason wasn't that good of a lover. But the illicit nature of what we were doing was a major turn-on. I guess you could say I was a cheating junkie. You were still working late and I still wanted to make out, so I told myself I would keep seeing Jason until you stopped working late. Sandi, I haven't worked late for 6 months now. I know, Rob, and I've tried to stop seeing Jason. But even though you and I were back to normal in the bedroom, the excitement of cheating kept me seeing Jason. I rationalized it by saying that you would never find out, and I was giving you all the love and attention you could handle, so as long as I was taking care of you, it wouldn't matter. I love you, Rob. Honest to God, I do love you. It was only make out with Jason. Please, Rob, we can work it out. You know I love you. She looked at me expectantly, but what she was hoping for wasn't going to happen. No way. I just wasn't wired that way. Sorry, Sandi, I said. But you should have known me well enough to know how I would take your cheating on me. Your argument that it was just make out with Jason and not love cuts no ice with me. You betrayed me. You betrayed my love for you, and you kicked what we had into the gutter just so you could get laid when I couldn't do it. Wait, did you ever stop to think that I like sleepover as much as you? But I was doing without while I worked for our future. No, you didn't. You didn't even give me a thought as you hurried to fall into bed with Jason. You are used goods now, Sandi. You are unclean as far as I'm concerned, and I could never bring myself to touch you again. You said that you rationalized it by thinking that I would never know, but I do know now, Sandi, and the thought that you could do that to me, to us, disgusts me. No, Sandi, there is no forgive and forget in me. You and I are over and done. It was over when I saw you pull into the parking lot at the Super 8. How did you find out about that? I was so careful. I told her about the email that led to my being at the motel, and I saw her lips tighten and something change in her eyes. No chance, Rob. No chance at all for us. None. I saw a tear run down her cheek, and then she stood up and left without another word. There was no divorce. Sandi and I are still man and wife, and I see no reason to pay an attorney and all the other costs of a divorce when it doesn't really matter. If I meet someone and like her enough to get serious, maybe then I'll go for a divorce. Sandi won't be going for a divorce either, at least not for about 15 or 20 years. The night she got up and left our kitchen, she went to find Jason. He was in the bar where they had always stopped for drinks after work. Witnesses say that she walked up to him, called him a rotten idiot, and then said, "You just couldn't let it be, could you? You just had to ruin my marriage and cost me the man I love. Well, freak you arsehole," and she pulled a gun out of her purse and shot him. She put all 6 shots from the revolver into his chest, the last 2 when he was already lying dead on the floor, and then she spit on him and walked over and sat down in a booth and waited for the police. The story that came out was that she and Jason had gotten careless and Sandi had gotten pregnant. She told Jason she was going to have an abortion, and then she wasn't going to see him anymore. He tried to talk her out of it. He wanted the baby, and he wanted her to have the baby and marry him. She told him that she didn't love him and never would, that she loved me and would never leave me. Jason sent me the email expecting me to throw Sandi out and then they could be together. When I told Sandi about the email, she knew instantly who Infospreader was, and she went looking for him. Even though I wouldn't take her back, I did get her a very good defense attorney, and when it was over, she ended up sentenced to 20 years for something that she should have gotten her the death penalty. I'm told she could actually be out in 10 to 12 years if she keeps her nose clean in prison. She had the baby in prison and gave it up for adoption. She sends me a letter a month asking me to come visit her on visiting days. I have never gone and I don't ever intend to. What would be the point? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, comment your thoughts below, and of course subscribe to the channel for more gripping stories like this one. And make sure to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.